and welcome back to Ron Hasn't Seen. Tonight we're continuing my series on musicals I haven't seen with 1971's Fiddler on the Roof. Fiddler on the Roof is an adaptation of the 1964 play of the same name by Jerry Bach, Sheldon Harnick, and Joseph Stein, which in turn is based on a series of short stories called Tevier and His Daughters by Sholem Aleichem. I'm hoping I get these names right. The film was directed by Norman Jewison, and it was written by Stein as well. It stars Chaim Topol, mostly just known as Topol, as Tevier. He also played the role in over 3,000 performances of the stage musical between 1967 and 2009. The film received 8 Academy Award nominations with 3 wins. It was nominated for Best Picture and Director, Best Actor for Topol, Best Supporting Actor for Leonard Frey as Model, and Art Direction for Robert F. Boyle, Michael Stringer, and Peter Lamont. It won for Best Cinematography for Oswald Morris, Best Adapted Score for John Williams, and Best Sound for Gordon K. McCallum and David Hildyard. The plot follows Tevier, a dairy farmer, and his family as he tries to balance tradition and modernity in a Jewish settlement in a small Russian or Ukrainian, I believe, rural village of Anatevka. It mostly focuses on how he treats his daughters and marrying them off. It's kind of the plot lines we follow. The oldest daughter is Teitzel, and she's allowed to choose her own husband, Motel the tailor, rather than being set up with Lazar Wolf, a more well-off older widower butcher who Tevier had already made an arrangement with, but he gives in to love, basically. And that follows with his next oldest. Holdo falls in love with a Marxist activist who's been in town, Perchek, and follows him after he's sent off to Siberia after he's arrested for protesting the Tsarist government. The third daughter, Hava, falls in love with a Gentile who's part of the other part of the village that's not the Jewish part, and she's basically just disowned. As the family drama is unfolding, you see the Tsarist government is kicking the Jews out of towns, kind of harassing them, trying to get them to leave, and finally everyone gets kicked out of Anatevka too. But as they're forced to leave, they're going to America. There is some reconciliation between Hava and her husband and Tevier and his family. The movie has a few changes, I believe about 6 extra scenes from the stage show, and the most notable to me was the fact that the constable is being given orders, and he seems a little more sympathetic rather than being the heavy kicking everybody out of the village and harassing the Jews. He really is presented as not being given a choice and sorry for it. I don't know how effective we're supposed to feel for him, but he is kind of presented in that way. So it's his superiors that are more demonized than him in this. Some of the other scenes are just a little more minor. There was a extra musical number, which I think was eventually cut as well from the show, or from the movie. And one of the notable changes, and this is something I noticed in the movie, like I haven't seen the play, but I noticed the color palette was very bland, very washed out, which is something different from the way the show was originally done with a little more color to it. I don't know if this was an artistic choice to kind of make it look washed over, rural, old, or just that 70s kind of gritty aesthetic a lot of films had at the time. So as far as my opinion on this film, this is going to be one of those films. I understand why it's considered a classic, and I think it's a well-made film. The acting's good. It's pretty, if not washed out. It has a real authenticity to it, a verisimilitude. But I just didn't particularly like it. It was heavy and depressing, and that carried through to the music. I'm not saying they really should have glossed over the diaspora and all the problems the Eastern European Jews were having at the time as part of their history. As a matter of fact, I think the historic and cultural significance of this is why you should see this film. But even though I'm recommending it, I did not love the film. I've heard versions of Matchmaker and Tradition and If I Were a Rich Man, and there's energy and life to them in the movie. It just felt flat. It went with that commitment to that verisimilitude, to that realism. And it really works to give power and empathy to the story, but it hurts the entertainment value in a significant way. And it just makes everything feel flat and lifeless. For a movie about life persisting through family struggle and external struggle, it's lifeless. It's just limp. And everyone I've spoke to who's seen the movie and seen a stage version kind of agrees that the stage version presents these things much more lively, and there's light and there's just something to it. And even though the film, made over $80 million on a $9 million budget, the critics kind of at the time felt this way too. Like Ebert and a bunch of other reviewers say it's a beautiful film. It's something you need to see. It's a great made film, but it's just boring and lifeless. And I really think that's the problem. Like, yes, you need to see this film. It needs to be in the zeitgeist. It needs to not just as a Jewish history, but as allegories for different cultures trying to live together and the problems with that in the past and how we can overcome it. It's really important in that respect. But it's not what I expect out of a musical. The entertainment perspective, you expect the musical numbers to be more fanciful, and these are just so grounded. It just is almost jarring in a way. It's so realistic. Yeah, I think it's a something you need to see once. I don't feel I need to see it as a film again. I don't mind going to see it as a show, and I might when it comes through, which it does every so often. Yeah, I think it's an important film, but it's not an entertaining film. It is a good, solidly made film, but it's not a feel good show. So just be warned going in. I thought there was going to be a little more life to it, and I think that clouded my opinion of it. So, well, that's really going to be it for my review of Fiddler on the Roof. Next week is going to be a little more lively with Chicago, the Rob Marshall musical from, I think, 2002. That's going to be a continuation of our musicals, and I'm going to I really, at that point, I think I'm going to contrast how I feel about a heavy story having lightness to it by the way the film's presented to this. So I hope to talk about that next week. If you like what I'm doing, please like and subscribe. Please comment if you have anything to say about Fiddler on the Roof. If you think I've been a little harsh, once again, I think it's a good film. I just don't think it's something to just sit and watch as an entertaining movie. So, thanks again. This has been Ron Hasn't Seen, and I'll see you again.